Good afternoon. Welcome to episode 18 of Legal Content Chat. Can you believe it? I'm still here every week with new guests. It is very exciting. So thank you so much for supporting me and this wondrous show. So I'm your host, Becky. I'm a legal marketing strategist and copywriter, and I help both legal firms and legal tech businesses get their marketing right. So today's event, it was called Why I Niche to Help Lawyers with Jono Randell-Nash. Okay, my delightful friend Sarah Wee suggested that perhaps I should change the title to a bit more clickbaity, Get Rich with Jono. Jono, the ever lawyer, then wanted a caveat to explain that that doesn't happen overnight. So Get Rich Slowly with Jono perhaps was going to be the new title, and then it just all got a bit ridiculous. So that's where we're at with this now. So thank you so much, as I said, for being here today. I really appreciate your comments and engagement, so go ahead and put them in the box and let's get into it. So Jono is an independent financial advisor and he specializes in helping lawyers and legal professionals. So without further ado, take away the stage, Jono. Go for it.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. I've been watching your lives for, I don't think I've made the 17 previously, but quite a few of them. So big shoes to fill from your last guest. Yeah, so basically, thanks for the intro. I mean, I am actually a qualified lawyer. So I got to 2 years PQE before I left for various reasons, which funnily enough, I did a podcast recording with Holly Coke. I know it's been on your show yesterday. So if you want to cover that, that's coming out in a different podcast. So I won't talk too much about why I left, but fundamentally the really easy reason for me is that I like numbers, not words. So I was in the wrong career to start with, basically. But yeah, now I retrained. I went on some paternity leave, did some more exams and retrained as an IFA. So I now help lawyers with their financial planning, which is quite nice to come full circle and keep one foot in the legal camp as well. So yeah, I really appreciate you bringing me on. And one thing I would say, I know that I looked at the some of the attendees, and there's people that are based not just in the UK. I would caveat that I talk about sort of general planning concepts, but anything that I talk about typically is UK, so it's England and Wales primarily that where I deal with. So take everything I say with a pinch of salt. It's not advice, all the rest of the lovely caveats that I have to include.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember you saying before about your posts and how they have to be approved and financial advice and yada, yada, yada. So we'll get that disclaimer in early, shall we?
Yeah, easy. Yeah, let's do that. Thank you.
Yeah. So can you tell us a bit more about your services? How do you mainly help lawyers?
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple of ways that that I help, because it's more that holistic financial planning. So people typically come to me on a couple of things. Sometimes their issues, that is their issue. Sometimes it's not that. Sometimes it's a few other things, but typically it's looking at their personal insurance. So what happens to them and their family if anything happens to them? What would the implications be? Do they have the correct cover? Do they need something new put in place? It's also then looking at their goals based. So do they want to retire? I don't like the term retirement. I like financial independence, because it's being able to afford to stop work. You don't have to. I've got loads of people who want to carry on working, but they want to know when they can afford to stop, and then they can choose to carry on. That's a big part of it. And then it's also any other interim goals they have. People might want to pay for university or school fees, or house deposit for the kids. They plan on moving house. I think a lot of what I do is making sure that they're making the most of the income they've got, what they're trying to do, what assets they might have, are they making best use of that? But then also, what do they prioritize? Where do they put the money? Do they have enough? Will they have enough? How do they quantify what all of that looks like for them? I'm flickering. Am I flickering to you as well? Is that
You are flickering. I am seeing this happening, and I don't really know why. Well, I can't explain it. I don't know why.
You can still hear me. Am I breaking up, or is that?
No, your voice is fine. It's just you're flickering yourself. I don't know why this is happening, but we'll roll with it. We'll keep going. We'll just plod on.
Because it's kind of irritating for me. So apologies to everyone that's watching if that's off-putting. But yeah, so there's like a number of things that people want to look at, and sometimes it's people want to just pay less tax, which is obviously something I look at. But paying less tax is not a goal. It's like, why are you paying less tax? What are you trying to achieve? What does that look like? Why should you be paying less tax? And also, it like death and taxes, they're certainties. It's not necessarily no tax. It's which tax do you want to pay. So that's always kind of one of the things that I look at for clients. And then generally, I mean, you'll know from my posts, quite a lot of it is that trying to just improve education around things that you might not even realize you're making decisions on, and why you need to think about that. One of the things that another advisor I know, he's got this thing, he calls it a six-figure tick box. You start a new employee role, you tick a box about default fund in your pension or something, and then you don't think anything of it. And then people come to you later and they're like, oh, what's going on with that? And you're like, okay, well, there's things you need to do and steps you need to take to look at that. So that's sort of some of the things that then factor into the plans that I put in place for clients. What can they afford, when, and that financial independence. Do they want that to come early? What does that look like? What's the compromise you have to make? But then making sure that people don't just live for tomorrow and never enjoy today. It's trying to get that right balance, because I think that's key. You don't know what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, that's right. And I really love the way that you've put that, because, we're running our own businesses. I can speak for myself to say that I really love it. I don't want to stop. Obviously, I'm far too young to retire anday, so that's not on my agenda right yet. But, we will get to a point where, I will want to take my foot off the gas, but, to know that you can still work and have that financial security and choose to work is a lovely concept, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I'd always prefer to be able to afford to stop and then carry on, rather than have to work because you can't afford to stop. I think that's quite a poor place to be. And obviously there's unlikely to be enough money for everything, but it's just prioritizing, and I think sometimes helping people work out what they say they want something, but do they want that massive house with a big mortgage, but actually they then can't go on holiday? What does that look like? Have you thought that through? That's part of the sort of emotional decision making that I help clients with as well, which is quite an enjoyable aspect of the job, to be honest.
Yeah, so I guess it's asking all of those really kind of emotive questions, like, do you really want this, or do you actually want that, or do you want that because that's what you've been conditioned to think? Or it's about designing your life, isn't it? Which is so empowering, I think.
Exactly that. I think one of the big misconceptions that people have is like, I'll put off coming and speaking to you once I know what I want to do. And I was like, to be honest, that's unlikely to happen on your own unless you have some headspace. Like, I have quite a few couples that I work with, and the meetings are a headspace for them and some time away from kids' work, whatever it is, to have a conversation. And if I ask them, what do you want your life to look like? They look at each other and they're like, and then they say different things. So sometimes I feel like a bit of a couples counselor, but it's a good thing, because that you don't have enough time often, or you're tired, and actually sitting down and having those conversations of what does that look like to you. People don't typically bring that conversation up out of nowhere. It's not typical dinner party conversation, so it's quite helpful to have.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like that idea. So niching your services to help lawyers, was that something you decided to do intentionally because you still wanted to be, in the legal space because you've been in it before? Or was there something that you thought, you know what, this can actually really help, and that's why I've decided to go down this route? What was your thinking there?
Yeah, so not to fudge my answer, but it was a little bit of both. So when I retrained, I was applying for roles, and I had to put a business plan together of how I was going to find clients and what that would look like, and based on my background and my network, and I knew that there was a need there particularly for lawyers to get some help, and I particularly knew that world. I was sort of talking to people when I left the law. One of the things that I found the most enjoyable aspects of it was how the firm worked and how it made money. So I've always kind of really understood that commercial aspect. So I knew that I could bring that to the table from the other side without them needing to explain that to me as well, which is quite helpful. Things like what career paths they're going to take. Are they going to go down the consultancy route? Are they going to go through equity partnership? What does that mean? What does that mean for their finances as well? I'm in a great space because I understand it from the inside as well as the outside, which I thought was quite helpful. But then also there's practical steps, like lawyers are experts and they charge for their advice. So in my head, which has proved right in practice, which has been nice, is that I charge for my service, and people that want to pay for that typically are the ones that understand that there's a value to that, and that is easier for those that's based on their career and their experience with pricing and billing as well, which is quite useful.
Yes, I see. So, and also I know I find this easier when I decided to niche into helping the legal profession with their copywriting and marketing. It makes it easier for me to be able to market my services when you actually have a defined target audience rather than just being a generalist. Is that the case for you as well?
Yeah, definitely. It's easier to, in my content, I want to speak to that individual to say this, I see you can feel heard. And that is a lot easier when you've got a niche, because otherwise you can talk to everyone, you talk to no one. And some of these concepts I've probably learned from you and reading all of your posts as well, to be fair. But I think there's a few things in there, like, just the expenditure creep is something I talk about a lot in my posts, and that directly relates to things like scope creep when you're pricing. So I know that I think that's going to help, because then people can really understand, and the analogies for helping people understand concepts, I think if you can put it in plain English in a way that they relate to, it's just so much easier to get your head around. And I think some of the concepts I talk about, people think they're really complicated. They're not. But if you need to have some way of engaging them in something without going pensions, them going, boring, no, I don't want to talk about it. So
yeah, I know. I have to say that I do switch off when I hear those kind of words, but your posts are really great because you paint a bit of a picture of a story, and you have an example that you use of a couple, and they have XYZ income and they've got these assets, and actually you can really explain vividly on what their life is going to look like because they've already planned it and they started early to do so. So that way of explaining is much better than just going, well, you really need to put some money in the pension if you haven't started doing it already. What are you doing with your life,
Yeah, I think it's really hard without some context to understand what that looks like. Because if you say, I'm going to not put any money in a pension for 2 years or whatever, like, can be absolutely the right decision. I'm a self-employed or / director of my own limited company. I'm not putting money in a pension right now, but that's part of the plan. But it's understanding when you're going to start doing that. What's the cost? I've got a cost of delay point where if you miss out on contributions, what does that mean? How do you make that up? What's the additional cost that you have to make up? Not just the amount, the missed contributions, and then the gains as well. Got a few more posts coming out on that soon, just to quantify things. I think without it being quantified, you don't really understand what that means and how you can see it. And brains like graphs and numbers as well. Well, at least mine does. So.
Yes, yeah, makes sense. So are there any specific types of legal professionals that you work with?
Yeah, so I've got sort of 3 main types. So I work with barristers. Quite a lot of them, or most of them, are self-employed, so they don't have pensions insurance, and they have that, oh shoot moment, I need to actually do something about this, and the tax planning. Plus, so consultant solicitors, again, similar, if they're like sole traders or limited company, they've got similar issues and they need help. I've got employed and in-house lawyers, and then equity partners, where they then go full circle and become self-employed again. So those are primarily the people that come to me for advice.
Okay, cool. So what are some can you just talk us through some typical situations that your clients find themselves in, and then how you resolve that for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got some sort of goal-based things that I work with. So quite high earners, where they're going, I earn lots of money, but I'm saving. I don't know if I'm saving enough. Can I reduce my hours? I got one barrister I'm working with. He wants to work a 4-day week and still afford all of his long-term plans. And he's like, I need your help quantifying whether I'm putting enough away and I can live today and work a day less a week. And what does that look like for my life? I've got some other clients, they're putting lots of money away. They've been putting, big percentages into their pensions each year, but they're like, are we putting too much away? What does that look like for us? Like, we've got other goals. We want to save for a house deposit for our children, maybe university fees. How do we do this effectively? We want to go on a few more holidays. Then there's other people where, they've had a friend that's something's happened to them. They've been ill, and they're like, what happens if something happens to me if I can't work? Sort of injury, illness, or even death. Like, what does that look like for my family? Can we talk through those options? I think those are the 3 key bits of what I do to help people, whether they've got a limited company or they're a sole trader or they're employed. The fundamentals of what are they worried about in their life? Is it when can I stop work? I want to do that as soon as possible. How do I put enough away? What does that look like? Quantify that for me. Those are sort of the key areas where I help. Basically, like, do I have enough? Will I have enough? And do I have provisions in place in case something goes wrong? That's the key bit.
Yeah, and it's about having those pots of money essentially, and if there's enough in all of those pots, and are they working in the best way way for you, I guess, as well.
Exactly that, because there's balancing things like, tax efficiency. If you put money into a pension, you put it in, like, pre-tax, but then you can't access it till you're at least 57, 58. Do you want to do that? Does that work for you? What about if I want to access it? I don't know. I might want to buy a new house, or a client wants to buy a camper van and go travel Europe. Like, where should I put that money? Like, what are the rules I need to be aware of? Like, how do I do that? And it's not just focusing on the tax. It's like, how do I make my life look the way I want it, and sort of understand what I'm doing and when I should give up control and access and when I shouldn't.
Yeah, and that's such a valuable service that you're providing. So what's your favorite thing about your job?
My favorite thing about my job is when I speak to a client and it's either a current client or a new potential client where they come in and their shoulders like up here and they're like, oh my God, I'm just so stressed about X, Y, Z. And then through the conversation, I can answer all of their questions at a high level. I can't give them advice in that meeting because I need to go and run the numbers and use our software for the cash flow, all the rest of it. But by the end of it, they're like, you know what? I'm outsourcing a lot of my stress to you. You're going to worry on my behalf. And also knowing that they're taking choices, but like, are they making the right choices? They've thought things through, but is there anything they're missing? That peace of mind that I give them of like, yeah, markets are crap right now. Excuse my French. You're in the right place. That's okay. You don't need to worry. And then they can just go and do whatever else that they were doing without spending time that they don't have or they don't want to be spending researching this. They can go hang out with family, go work, go do their hobbies. That's my favorite bit because people get their time and that stress release.
Yes, I think that the time is an important part, but I also think the amount of energy that we spend thinking about money, worrying about money potentially, I think a lot of us underestimate that as well. And I know I certainly did when I outsourced my finance piece, and I just absolutely love it because I go, okay, there you go. You come to me and tell me when something's going wrong or something we need to look at, and it's absolutely marvelous. And it just gives me that freedom to work on my business, to know that I've got that energy and that space to do the important things that I need to focus on, which finances is not my area, so that's fine.
Yeah, I see my role as sort of being proactive with people so that they don't have to worry about the deadlines, but also really importantly in modern day, I'm like a product salesman shield because people are always going to try and sell you something, whether it's advertising, direct messages on LinkedIn. If you know that I'm dealing with all of that and I have to sift through all that, I do the research, I tell you what's the right thing, then you can just ignore all of that noise. And that is I find a lot of people before they come to me, there's so much of a drain on their mind that they weren't even aware of. You know, you walk on if you're in the tube, bus, TV, you're going to see investment and financial services products and be like, is that the right one? Should I be switching? And it's just, so yeah.
Yeah. New shiny object syndrome.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah. So we had a question that came through from Adam Rogers, who I promised that I would give you a shout out twice. Adam Rogers, who said to me via LinkedIn that he couldn't make it today. Absolutely fine. You know, this is a one-time thing. You can miss this one, but you must attend all the others, please. So you've got a pass for today. So he's a fellow IFA. He's from Warwick, and he's got a question for you, which is, please could you cover the position on an IFA making a payaway / introductory fee to another lawyer? Is this acceptable practice if declared to the client? He gives a little bit of context with this. He's worked with divorce lawyers whereby I slot in mid-process to determine what level of income is enough for a divorcee. Hopefully that all makes sense to you, Jono. Please advise.
Yeah, so it does make sense. So referral fees happen in various different industries, and in finance I know that people do have referral fees in place where they pay like a percentage away if someone refers a client, or a lump sum, or they do gifts or whatever. I don't think it's a problem, particularly if you declare it up front. So that if you're saying to someone, I'm referring you to X, by the way, I will get paid for this, I think that's not a problem. Personally, I don't do it because I don't like the idea that I'm bettering my discretion, and someone might think that there's a perceived conflict that I'm only recommending to them for that reason. I only recommend because they're the best and I don't get a kickback, and I'm happy with how that works for me. But I think if you do decide to do that, sometimes it can create a relationship with someone whereby you're more likely to work closely together, maybe. It's not my choice, but I don't see there being a big issue, particularly as he's highlighted that you disclose it so they've got knowledge of it.
Yeah.
In fact, I did have this question from a client. They said, I referred them to an accountant that happens to be my accountant. They're going, are you getting paid for this? And I said, no. And they said, it would have been a positive for me if you had, and I don't mind it, which was novel. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, my accountants, they're brilliant, and that was fine. But I mean, it's different for everyone. I think certain clients won't mind, some will. And if you choose to do that and they do mind, then maybe they're not ideal clients anyway, because there's not a great fit there, maybe.
Yeah, that does make sense actually. So in terms of stuff that's happening within your business, have you got any events or anything exciting coming up in terms of project to tell our audience about?
I think maybe I'm going to shout about the podcast I went on with Holly, because it's really important to me, because I did that career change and all that I learned from it, and also because I now love my job and I didn't before. As I mentioned, personal thing that it wasn't a good fit with me. But other than that, no projects, only 2, 3, maybe 4 posts a week on LinkedIn. That's my jam at the moment. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, we'll definitely put a link to that podcast episode in our show notes, because Holly is doing a great job in the podcast world, and she's definitely someone that I look up to, because she's much more professional than I am, because I can't even say professional. So there you go. Shout out to Holly Cope. She is a legend, and her podcast is all about how people can transition from that kind of traditional, unhappy 9-to-5 legal role into doing something, either becoming a digital nomad, or in your case, becoming an IFA. So yeah, lots of interesting stories on her podcast, aren't there?
Definitely. And also, if anyone's thinking about, like, they want to talk about what that looks like for doing different things, I'm always happy to have a chat, because it's nice to meet people. And I work from home, which explains this wallpaper. Not quite as good as yours, to be fair, but I do get a few shout outs for it. But I always quite nice to do things like this and virtual coffees, because otherwise I just work from home and I badger my wife constantly with wanting to talk to someone, and she gets a bit bored of it at times. So
yeah, I'm the same. My husband comes home, and if I don't talk to enough people during the day, I then just like badger him and just like, talk to me, and he won't, and it's really quite upsetting. So yeah, it's good to have people in our life. So we've had a question come in from a lovely Yvette Asker, a more simple question from Yvette, so that makes sense, Yvette. So myself and my husband can really do with talking to you. My main point of hesitation is actually that I think I would have to find several hours preparing and looking up pensions, savings, etc., before we even speak. Is this necessary? Is this a legitimate worry?
it's a very good question. So there is an element of homework that you have to do. How long that takes you does depend a little bit on how organized you are. So I need pension providers, pension names, policy numbers. I don't need much more than that, because I would write to the providers with a letter of authority that the client signs, and then get all the information I need from the provider. The other bit that I need does take about 20 minutes of prep. You have to complete a risk questionnaire, and provide just some basic details in terms of things like income, expenditure. The expenditure one is an interesting one, because that can be where a lot of people need to spend some time working out what they are spending money on. Some people have spreadsheets, some people have got no idea, some people would go and, I mean, there's also easy ways of doing that. So this is a very long-winded answer, but you don't need more than about 20 minutes of prep before that meeting, but you might need to do some more afterwards, depending on what you're able to dig up. But it shouldn't be a huge barrier to having that first meeting. It's just a barrier to me giving full advice. Well, we need to get everything before I start making recommendations.
Yes, I see. And with our bank accounts nowadays, I think it's quite useful, because it can categorize all your expenditure into different sections, and how much you're spending on groceries and how much you're spending on Amazon, in my case, which is never good, or how much you're spending on your animals. So at least you do have a rough idea of where your money is actually going.
Yeah, and I sometimes think that I put a post out on this the other day, actually, that the more detailed your budget is, I think my title was that the more likely it's going to be incorrect, because you can, like, you know what you're spending on council tax and food and telephone, mobile, all that sort of stuff. But you have to guess of, eating out, food, and all the rest of it. So actually, the best way is, if you've got one bank account, it's easier. But it's like, what was the money you had at the beginning of the year? What did you have at the end? Is there more than there was? Divide that by 12. That's your surplus. How much did you spend minus any capital expenditure? I mean, don't put a new kitchen on that unless you're doing it every year. Divide that total by 12, and that's your rough spend. That gives you a good indication without you needing to do an awful lot of work.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Hopefully that's answered your question, Yvette, and you should definitely get in touch to sort all that out. I remember when I was sorting out my pensions, I had 3 from 3 different jobs, and also I'd got married and changed my name since then, so that was an added layer of complication. But once you start, it's actually not as bad as you think it's going to be, is it?
Yeah, and you only have to do it once, so that's quite helpful. And also, if you don't know where things are, I can send links. I can put it in a comment afterwards as well. There's government websites you can trace old pensions. You basically just put in where you worked and what year, and it will tell you who the provider is. Then potentially an email or a 2-minute call with your national insurance number, and they'll tell you your policy number, what name it's under. You can update. Most of them will let you update your address over the phone or via email afterwards. So it's not as arduous as you think. It's like most things, it feels so much worse than it actually is in reality, which stops people taking that step of going, okay, I'm going to do this now. So great question.
Or tracing back through old emails and trying to find passwords and all of that fiasco is always a headache. So that's really useful. Thank you. And we'll put those in the show notes as well. So please let me have those, Jono, also. So if anybody else has got any more questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat. Yvette says, thanks, very useful. Okay, so hopefully she'll book a call in with you soon. Is there a best way to get a hold of you?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, say that again. I missed that.
I was going to say, while other people are thinking of any questions they might want to ask me, one of the questions I usually get asked is, well, people have this expectation that you need millions to speak to me. That's not the case. There is an element of you need to have a certain level of assets before it makes commercial sense for me and for you. And just because I only have a set number of clients, if you catch an advisor earlier in their journey, they're going to have more time for you than if you find someone who's at the end of their career. They're going to have a probably full with clients and not looking for new clients. So that's just a little thing to be aware of. But yeah, you don't need millions to speak to me. Most of my clients, the average is about 100 to 120,000. It's nudging up at the moment in terms of, stocks and shares, ISAs, general investment accounts and pensions. That's typically the average I've got at the moment.
Yeah, okay, that is good to know. So is there one piece of advice, if you had to give one piece of advice to lawyers out there that are thinking that they might need your services but they're not quite sure, what would you say?
I'd say think about whether you are stressed that you are on what your goals are and if you know how you're going to get there. If you don't, that suggests you need to speak to a financial planner, because the goal part of it is crucial, because prioritization of where your money is going is key. And as to what, it's easier to start early. Any of my posts you'll see, there's one coming up about starting a junior pension for a child. If you put £2,880 a year into their pension for 18 years, you put about 72 grand and it turns into 300 grand or so. Look at my post for the exact details. When they're like in their 60s, it's really powerful. So the earlier you start, the better. But there's obviously the practical aspect of, you need to be able to afford your bills. So I do get that. But yeah, just think about, are you on track to get where you want to go?
Yeah, lovely stuff. Okay, and can people message you on LinkedIn should they feel the need?
Yes, so I don't charge for initial meetings. I don't charge for calls. I'm very happy to respond to messages. Quite often I speak to people and I don't take them on, or they don't want to instruct me. But quite often in that meeting they'll still get a lot of value and I'll still be able to help them work some things out. So it shouldn't be a barrier in that respect.
Yes, that's cool. And you are a very nice man, as I can attest to. And I do appreciate all your support on my posts. You're always liking and commenting, which is so nice to see. So thank you for that.
Oh, you post great stuff. It's kind of hard not to be honest.
Oh, this is so nice, isn't it? What a lovely vibe we've got going on this Wednesday. So this is my shameless plug coming up for if you want to be in the hot seat. So if you want to sit where Jono's sitting right now, well, not actually where he's sitting right now with that wallpaper, but from your own house, you get the drift. Please let me know. I am actually getting pretty full now with LinkedIn Live guests, and we are booking into June, which is super exciting. So every Wednesday lunchtime, we have somebody new. And if you've been listening a while, you'll know that there's 3 criteria. Got to be in the legal industry. You do have to be interesting and have something to say, and also do have to like you as well. And that doesn't always happen. So, we could take chances and see what will happen. But next week, we're going to have business development guru Gemma Francis on, and she is going to be talking about legal BD. Okay, so why doing a good job isn't good enough. So we've gone in with quite a controversial title this time. So that is going to be a good one. So that will be on LinkedIn for you to register for. Thank you so much, Jono, for today. I really appreciate it. It's been a lovely lunchtime chat.
Yeah, much less scary than I thought it was going to be. You make it really easy. So thank you.
Yeah.
Slow down as well, which is nice. So I'm sorry again for having to listen to me while constantly flicking in and out as well. Not ideal.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what was going on there, but it definitely seems to have stopped, doesn't it? So yeah, that is all good. Great stuff. So show notes will be on my podcast. I will put the link online later once that is up, and you will have that information that Jono mentioned about tracking down those pesky pensions that you have no idea where they might well be. So thank you again for tuning in. Thank you, Jono, and we will catch you next week. Bye
Thanks
for
again,
now.
Becky.